Aliens claimed humans can't fight unarmed. She cracked their champion's wrist. The station smelled like something between rust and rain. That was the first thing Kang Yu noticed when he stepped off the transport and onto the Eternal Meridian, the Galactic Council's floating summit platform, parked somewhere between the third and fourth rings of the Sura system. It was massive, it was loud, and it made him feel very, very small. He had been to alien stations before. He had shaken hands, or what passed for hands, with 7 different species in the last 4 years. He had eaten food that moved on the plate and smiled through it. He was a diplomat. Smiling through things was basically his job description. But this place was different. This was the big one. 43 species, all sitting in the same room, all talking at the same time in 43 different languages. And somehow the translation implants in everyone's ears managed to turn it all into something resembling sense. Park Rena walked 2 steps behind him, as she always did in formal settings. She was his military advisor, though that title always made people underestimate her, which she had long since stopped caring about. She was not tall. She did not look like the kind of person who could end a situation quickly. That was, as Kang Yu had learned over 3 years of working with her, precisely the point. She carried no weapon. None of the Earth delegation did. That was one of the Council's entry rules: no weapons inside the summit hall. Every species followed it, more or less. Some species, of course, didn't need weapons. Their bodies were the weapon. Rena had thought about that rule more than once, and found it quietly funny. The summit hall was a wide, circular room with tiered seating arranged in rings, each ring a little higher than the one before it. Earth sat in the 5th ring, not the lowest, but not near the top either. Humanity was still considered a junior member of the Council. They had been granted full observer status 8 years ago, and voting rights only 2 years back. In galactic terms, they had just learned to walk. The session started with routine business, trade agreements, border disputes in the outer sectors, a lengthy argument between the Pelori and the Fenkai about navigational rights through a particular asteroid belt that had apparently been going on for 60 years and showed no sign of ending. Kang Yu took notes. Rena sat with her hands in her lap, and her eyes moving slowly around the room, watching everyone the way a person watches a door they're not sure is locked. Then the Velthari ambassador took the floor. His name was Doru. He was tall, nearly 2.5 meters, with a body that looked like someone had built a creature out of pale stone, and then decided to give it 8 limbs just to be excessive. His skin had the texture of dry clay, and the color of old bone. He moved carefully, the way very large things often do, like he was always aware of how much space he was taking up. He stepped to the center platform and adjusted the translation emitter at his collar. His voice when he spoke was deep and flat. Not unkind exactly, just completely without warmth, the way a wall is not unkind. It simply does not consider you. The Velthari, he explained, had been reviewing the Council's recent security restructuring plan, the one that suggested rotating species representatives into a joint peacekeeping force, a combined unit, different species, different strengths, working as one. Doru's problem, he said, was with the human slot. He pulled up a display, charts, biological data, skeletal density comparisons across 12 species, muscle fiber analysis, neural response times. He walked through each one with the calm patience of someone who had clearly prepared this presentation and was going to deliver every slide whether anyone wanted him to or not. The conclusion, when it came, was delivered without hesitation. Humans, Doru said, were biologically unsuited for direct physical engagement. Their bones were too light, their skin offered no natural protection. Their recovery time from injury was slow. Their pain response was, and here he used a word that translated somewhat loosely as catastrophically poor. In a scenario where weapons were removed, say, a boarding action, a close-quarter situation, an emergency where equipment was lost, A human combatant would be, functionally, a liability. He said it the way someone might say, "The sky is blue." Not cruelly. Just as a fact. The hall reacted the way large rooms full of different species tend to react to things, with a low, mixed noise that could mean almost anything. Some species clicked or hummed when they agreed. Others went quiet. A few of the Pelori delegates made a sound that the translation implant rendered as gentle laughter, though Kang Yu suspected that wasn't quite right. He kept his face even. He had a very good face for keeping even. He did not look at Rena. Rena did not look at him either. Not with anger. Anger would have been readable, and she did not give people readable things without choosing to. She was looking at him the way she sometimes looked at a problem she had already started solving in her head, 3 steps ahead of the moment she was currently standing in. Doru was not finished. He added, as a closing remark, that this was not an insult. It was simply biology. Humans were remarkable in other ways. Their adaptability, their communication, their strange and unpredictable creativity. But combat? Unarmed combat especially? No. The data did not support it. The Velthari had studied 41 species in physical engagement scenarios, and humans ranked near the bottom in every meaningful category. He stepped back from the platform and folded 4 of his 8 limbs across his chest in what the translation implant noted as a gesture of finality. The room moved on. Other ambassadors began speaking. The agenda continued. Kang Yu wrote something on his tablet and slid it quietly across the table to Rena. She read it. It said, "He's wrong, isn't he?" It was not a question. Rena picked up the tablet stylus and wrote one word back. Yes. Then she set the stylus down, folded her hands on the table exactly as she had before, and looked back at the center platform with the same expression she had been wearing since the moment they walked in. Calm, patient, and completely utterly unimpressed. Kang Yu looked at the Velthari ambassador across the room. Doru was talking to one of his aides now, not paying attention to the human delegation at all. That, Kang Yu thought, was probably a mistake. He didn't know yet what he was going to do about it, but something had settled in his chest during Doru's presentation. Something quiet and firm, like a door closing. He had smiled through a lot of things in his career. He didn't feel like smiling through this one. Aliens claimed humans can't fight unarmed. She cracked their champion's wrist. The session broke for a mid-cycle recess, which in practice meant that every species went to their assigned lounge areas, ate or drank whatever their biology required, and talked about each other behind closed doors. Diplomacy at its core had always worked this way, regardless of what planet you came from. The Earth delegation's lounge was a small, clean room with white walls and a narrow window that looked out into open space. There were 6 of them in total: Kang Yu, Rena, 2 junior aides named Bake Sol and Ote, a communications officer, and an environmental specialist who was mostly there to make sure the air filtration didn't kill anyone. They sat around a low table with cups of instant coffee that had been brought from home, because the station's version of a hot drink tasted like warm metal. Nobody said much at first. He was 26, and had been on exactly 1 off-world assignment before this one. He still had the habit of saying things out loud that everyone else was only thinking. "That was pretty bad," he said. "It was a presentation," Kang Yu said. "A presentation that told 43 species that humans are useless in a fight. It told them we're not optimized for unarmed combat. That's not the same thing." "Is it not?" Kang Yu didn't answer that. He looked at his coffee. Rena was standing at the window. She had not sat down since they entered the lounge. She was watching the stars, the way she sometimes watched people, like she was reading something in them that wasn't immediately obvious. "They'll remember it," she said, without turning around. "That's the problem." Doru said it on the record, in the full session, in front of everyone. Even if nobody agrees with him, It's in the record now. It'll come up every time humans are proposed for anything involving physical risk. The room was quiet. So what do we do? Otay asked. Rena finally turned from the window. We answer it. Kang Yu looked at her. How? She didn't answer immediately. She sat down at the table and picked up one of the coffee cups and held it in both hands without drinking it. She was thinking, the kind of thinking that happened behind the eyes, where you could see the gears moving if you knew what to look for. The Velthari have a formal challenge structure, she said. It's in their diplomatic code. Any claim made on the council floor about another species' capability can be formally disputed through a demonstration. It's old. Most species don't use it anymore because it's considered blunt. Primitive even. But it's still valid. You want to challenge them? I want to answer them. That's the same thing. No, she said. A challenge is about pride. An answer is about truth. We'd be doing this for the record, same as they did it for the record. Bake Soul looked between them, like he was watching a very slow-moving accident. And if we lose? Rena set the cup down. We won't. There was something in the way she said it that stopped the next question before it formed. Not loud, not dramatic, just flat and certain. The way you say something when you are simply describing what is going to happen. Kang Yu rubbed the back of his neck. He knew what she was suggesting. He also knew that the council's formal demonstration rules were very specific. One representative, no weapons, no enhancements, no external support, a physical engagement in the ring under standard observation conditions. The result would be logged and attached to the original claim. Whatever happened would become part of the official record. He thought about it for a long time, or what felt like a long time. It was probably 40 seconds. Then he stood up, smoothed his jacket, and said, I'll file the formal dispute tonight. Rena nodded once. The Velthari delegation received the notice 3 hours later. Doru read it twice. Then he read it a third time, because he wanted to make sure the translation was correct and he hadn't somehow misunderstood the document. He hadn't. The humans were formally invoking a physical demonstration challenge in response to his presentation. One representative, no weapons, a ring match, standard rules, witnessed by the full council. He set the notice down and looked at his aide. They can't be serious, the aide said. They filed it correctly, Doru said. Every clause, every reference. Someone on their team knows our diplomatic code well. That doesn't mean they're serious. It might be symbolic. A gesture. Doru thought about that. He thought about the human woman he had seen sitting behind the chief diplomat during the session. She had been very still. He remembered noticing that, how still she had been, even when he was saying things that should have provoked a reaction. Most species reacted. The Pelori fidgeted, the Fenkai muttered. Even Doru's own aides had shifted in their seats at certain points in his presentation. The human woman had not moved at all. He accepted the challenge. The news moved through the station faster than the official announcement. By the time Kang Yu made the formal statement to the council press channel, half the delegations already knew. By the time the statement was finished, the other half did too. The Velthari's response was simple. They would send their combat representative, as required by the challenge rules. His name was Vrail. He was their reigning physical champion, a title he had held for 11 years without interruption. He stood just under 3 meters tall. His exoskeletal frame had a density that most handheld weapons struggled to penetrate. He had ended 14 formal challenge matches. He had never lost one. Somewhere in the outer districts of the station, in a communications relay room that one of the junior aides had commandeered, Bake Soul pulled up Vrail's record on a screen and read through it in silence. Then he very quietly said, "Oh no." Otay looked over his shoulder at the screen. He read it too. Then he looked at Rena, who was sitting on the other side of the room, reviewing something on a tablet, and completely ignoring both of them. Rena, Ote said carefully. Did you see Vrail's record? Yes, she said, without looking up. And? He leads with his right side, she said. Every match. He uses his left limbs for balance, and his right for impact. He's fast, but he has a habit of overextending on downward strikes. It's in the footage from Match 7, Match 9, and Match 12. Same pattern all 3 times. Ote stared at her. You already watched the footage, Big Soul said. I watched it before I suggested the challenge, she said. The room was quiet again. Outside the narrow window, the stars sat still and cold, and very far away. And somewhere across the station, in a Velthari preparation chamber, a 3-meter champion was no doubt being told the same thing everyone was thinking. That this was going to be quick and easy, and the humans had made a very strange mistake. Rena turned another page. She did not look worried. Aliens claimed humans can't fight unarmed. She cracked their champion's wrist. The ring was built in the station's central demonstration chamber, a wide open floor of gray composite material, ringed by observation tiers that climbed in steep curves all the way to the upper gallery. The chamber was designed for exactly this kind of thing: formal demonstrations, dispute resolutions, the kinds of moments that the Galactic Council preferred to have on record and on camera simultaneously. Every seat was taken. That was the first thing Kang Yu noticed when he walked in with the Earth delegation. He had expected interest. He had not expected this. The tiers were packed. Delegates, aides, press representatives from a dozen systems, and what appeared to be a significant number of station staff who had quietly found reasons to be in this part of the building. The hum of 43 different languages ran through the room like a low current, rising and falling, everyone talking, everyone watching the floor below. The Velthari section was easy to find. They sat in a solid block near the front tier, pale and still, their stone-colored limbs folded, with the rigid patience of people who are not nervous because they had no reason to be nervous. Doru sat at the center of their group. He was watching the ring. Kang Yu found the Earth section, 6 chairs, barely noticeable against the scale of the room, and sat down. Bek Sol sat beside him and said nothing, which was unusual enough that Kang Yu glanced at him. The young aide was pale. His hands were flat on his knees, like he was trying to keep them still. She'll be fine, Kang Yu said quietly. He did not look convinced. Park Rena came into the ring from the east entry corridor, alone. She was wearing the standard-issue gray training uniform that the Earth delegation had brought for physical assessments. No markings, no rank indicators, nothing. It was the kind of thing you wore when you were planning to move, not when you were trying to look impressive. Her hair was pulled back tightly. She carried nothing. She wore nothing on her hands or feet. The room did not go quiet when she entered. If anything, the noise increased for a moment, a ripple of reaction moving through the tiers. Some of it sounded like confusion. Some of it, from the Pelori section, sounded like laughter again. She was 163 centimeters tall. She walked to the center of the ring, stopped, and stood with her feet slightly apart and her hands loose at her sides. She looked around the room once, not nervously, not defiantly, just the way you look around a new space when you are getting your bearings. Then she looked at the Velthari section, found Doru, and looked at him for exactly 2 seconds. He looked back. Neither of them said anything. Vrail entered from the west corridor. The room did go quiet then, or close enough to quiet that the difference was noticeable. He was everything his record described and a little more. Nearly 3 meters of pale exoskeletal mass, moving with the kind of controlled weight that made the floor seem like it should be reacting to him, though it didn't. His primary limbs, the large upper pair, were held slightly away from his body, not raised, not aggressive, just ready. His face, what there was of it, showed nothing. He had been doing this for 11 years. He had long since stopped feeling anything particular about the moment before a match started. He looked at Rena. He looked at her the way you look at something that doesn't quite make sense. Not with contempt exactly, but with a kind of puzzled assessment. She was smaller than any opponent he had faced in formal competition. Most of the species in this chamber were larger than her. He had been told she was a military specialist. He had reviewed what records existed on human physical capability and found them deeply unimpressive. He took his position. The match official, a Thenkai in formal robes, stepped to the edge of the ring and spoke the standard opening in 3 languages. The rules were simple. No weapons, no external devices, physical contact only. The match ended when one party submitted, was incapacitated, or the official called a stop for safety. There was no time limit. Rena rolled her neck once, slowly, and settled her weight slightly forward. What most of the room did not know, what the Velthari research team had clearly not found in their data on human biology, was the story of how Park Rena had become the person standing in that ring. She had started training at age 7, not because anyone made her, because her grandmother had taken her to a Hapkido class in a small gym in Incheon, and she had watched the instructor throw a man twice his size across the mat, and something in her had gone completely still and completely certain at the same time. She trained for 4 years before she entered her first competition. She lost. She went home, ate dinner, slept, and was back in the gym the next morning. By the time she was 19, she had broken her right arm twice, once in competition, once in a training accident, involving a throw that went wrong in a way that nobody had planned for. Both times she had the arm set, waited the minimum required healing period, and gone back. Her coach at the time, Choi Dae, who had trained fighters for 30 years out of a gym in Busan, had told her once that she had the strangest relationship with pain he had ever seen in a student. It wasn't that she didn't feel it. She felt it. She just didn't seem to think it was a reason to stop. At 23, in a regional competition, she had dislocated her left shoulder mid-match. The official had moved to stop the fight. She had held up one hand, walked to the corner wall, pressed her shoulder against it, and reset the joint herself with a sharp breath and a sound that made 3 people in the front row look away. Then she had turned around, walked back to center mat, and finished the match. She won. Her opponent filed no formal complaint. He was, by several accounts, too stunned to think of it. She joined the military at 25. She was not the biggest or the fastest or the strongest person in her unit. She was, however, consistently the last one standing in any hand-to-hand evaluation, and her instructors had eventually stopped trying to explain it in technical terms and simply noted in her file that her pain tolerance was, quote, not standard. She had been assigned to diplomatic security because she was calm, professional, and understood that her job was to prevent problems, not create them. She had prevented a number of problems over 3 years, without anyone outside the delegation ever noticing. She had been waiting, in a way she wouldn't have described out loud, for exactly this kind of moment. The match official raised his hand. The room held its breath. Rena looked at Vrail. He was big, he was fast. She already knew that from the footage. He led with his right side. He overextended on downward strikes. He had never lost, because no one had ever been quick enough to get inside his reach. And getting inside the reach of something that size required either very good timing or no sense of self-preservation whatsoever. Rena had both, depending on how you looked at it. The official's hand dropped. The match began. Aliens claimed humans can't fight unarmed. She cracked their champion's wrist. Vrail moved first. He did not rush. That was the first thing Rena registered. He was disciplined, not reckless. He crossed the distance between them in 3 long strides that ate up the space faster than his size should have allowed, and led with a lateral sweep of his upper left limb, low and fast, aimed at her legs. She was already moving. She stepped back and to the right, just enough, and the limb passed close enough that she felt the air from it against her knee. The crowd noise spiked, a sharp collective sound from 40 different species reacting to how close it had been. She didn't hear it. Not really. When she was in the ring, sound went distant, like listening through water. There was only the space, the opponent, and the next 2 seconds. Vrail reset quickly. He adjusted his angle and came again, this time with his right primary limb, a straight, powerful drive aimed at her midsection with the kind of force that would have ended the conversation immediately if it connected. She dropped under it, low and fast, and moved laterally again, circling left. He turned with her. He was faster than he looked. She had known that from the footage, but knowing it and feeling it were different things. His reaction time was good, not perfect, but good. He tracked her movement without overcorrecting, which meant he had real experience, not just physical advantage. She kept circling. She kept her distance. She made him keep turning. The crowd was confused. She could tell by the sound. It had changed from sharp reaction noise to something lower, more uncertain. They expected a collision. They expected Vrail to close the gap and end it. Instead, the small human was moving around the outside of his reach in a circle that seemed to have no purpose. It had a purpose. She was reading him. Every time he stepped, she noted which limb moved first. Every time he reached, she noted how far the reach extended before it hit its natural limit. She was mapping the edges of his range, the rhythm of his weight shifts, the half-second pause he took before committing to a major strike. It was the same thing she had done since she was 7 years old, in every match, against every opponent. Big or small, slow or fast, the geometry was always there if you were patient enough to look for it. At 1 minute and 40 seconds, Vrail changed tactics. He stopped moving laterally and came straight forward, all his mass committed, closing the distance hard and fast. It was the right instinct. The only way to negate her movement pattern was to remove the space she was using. He came with both upper limbs spread wide to limit her angles, a pressure move designed to corner or overwhelm. She ran directly at him. That was not what he expected. Nothing in his 11 years of competition had prepared him for the opponent running toward the threat instead of away from it. He hesitated. Just half a step, just a fraction, and she was already inside his reach. Up close, he was a wall. She could feel the heat coming off his exoskeletal frame. She ducked his right limb as it adjusted to grab, went low along his left side, and drove her elbow hard into the joint connecting his lower left limb to his body, the softer connection tissue that the exoskeleton didn't fully cover. Vrail made a sound she had not heard from him before. Sharp. He moved to close her down, spinning fast, and caught her with a glancing impact from his upper body. Not a direct strike, just the momentum of his turn, and it hit her like a door being thrown open. She went sideways, caught herself on one hand, came back up before he had fully turned. Her shoulder blazed. She filed the information away. Not important yet. In the observation tier, Kang Yu was gripping the edge of his seat without noticing he was doing it. Beside him, Baek Sol had stopped breathing at some point in the last 90 seconds and had not yet started again. O Tae was standing up, which he was technically not supposed to be doing, but nobody was telling him to sit down because half the tier was doing the same thing. The Velthari section was very still. Doru watched the ring and said nothing. His aide leaned close and said something quietly. Doru did not respond. Twice in quick succession. Right, then right again, both downward. The first she slipped to the side. The second caught her across the upper arm, a hard, heavy contact that would leave something to deal with later. She let the force of it spin her, rather than absorbing it flat, which turned what would have been a stopping blow into a redirected one. and she came out of the spin at a different angle than he expected. Her arm was not happy. She noted that too, filed it. She moved back to distance and let him breathe for 4 seconds. Not because she needed the rest, though she did, but because she wanted him to feel like he had momentum. She wanted him to feel like the match was going the way he expected it to go. He pressed forward again, more confident now. He had landed 2 solid contacts. The pattern he knew, wear down, contain, finish, was working the way it always worked. He threw a downward right side strike. The same one from match 7. The same one from match 9. The same one from match 12. She was waiting for it. She didn't step back. She stepped forward and inside, angled to his right, getting her body past the outermost point of the strike's path. His limb came down, and she was no longer where it was going. She got both hands on his right primary limb, one above the joint, one below, and turned. Not with muscle, with geometry. The same principle she had been taught at age 9 in a small gym in Incheon. A lock is not about strength. It's about angle. It's about putting a joint in a position its body did not design it to go, and then applying pressure in the direction it cannot follow. Vrail's physiology had never been mapped for this kind of engagement. Nobody had ever tried. Nobody had ever gotten close enough to try. She applied the pressure. For 1 full second, nothing happened. He was strong enough that even the correct angle took a moment to register. She felt his limb fighting the lock, felt the enormous force of him pushing back against the direction she was taking it. And she added her body weight, dropped her hips, rotated her shoulders, drove everything she had into the mechanical logic of the hold. The crack was not loud. It was actually quite small, a clean, sharp sound, like a knuckle popping, but with more weight behind it. In the open space of the demonstration chamber, it carried clearly to the first several tiers. Vrail went down, not slowly, not in stages. His legs simply stopped holding him, and he dropped straight to the floor, all 3 meters of him, and the impact of that landing was louder than the crack had been. His right primary limb was held at an angle that it was not supposed to be held at, and he was making a low, continuous sound that the translation implant could not find a word for. Rena stepped back. She released his limb carefully, not dropping it, setting it down, and stepped back 2 full paces. Her right shoulder was burning steadily. Her left arm had a deep ache from the earlier impact. She was breathing hard, though she was trying not to show it. She looked at the match official. The official looked at Vrail on the floor, then at Rena. Then he raised his hand and spoke the 3-language declaration that every species in the room understood. The match was over. The chamber was completely silent for 4 full seconds. Then the noise hit. Not applause, not exactly, because 43 species expressed reaction in 43 different ways, but a wave of sound that rose from every tier simultaneously and bounced off the high ceiling of the demonstration chamber and came back down like something physical. Rena stood in the center of the ring. Her hands hung at her sides. Her face was composed. She looked, to anyone watching closely, like someone who had just finished a thing she had expected to finish, and was now waiting to see what came next. Then, out of habit, 11 years of competition, 1,000 practice sessions, a gym in Incheon and a gym in Busan, and mats in a dozen different countries, she turned toward the Velthari section and bowed. Not deeply, not sarcastically, just once, the way you bow when a match is finished, because that was what you did. Doru stared at her. She turned and walked back toward the east corridor. Her shoulder was going to meet ice. She thought there might be some in the delegation lounge. She thought about that, and about the cup of coffee that was probably cold by now, and about whether Beck's soul had managed to breathe at any point in the last 4 minutes. Behind her, the noise in the chamber kept climbing. Aliens claimed humans can't fight unarmed. She cracked their champion's wrist. The official record was updated within the hour. Doru's original presentation, the one with the charts, the skeletal density comparisons, the careful and well-researched conclusion that humans were biologically unsuited for unarmed physical engagement, now had an attached response file. It was logged under the standard dispute resolution format, noted as formally resolved, and stamped with the match result in clean, neutral language. Human representative, Park Rena. Velthari representative, Vrail. Result, human representative wins by joint incapacitation. Duration, 4 minutes, 17 seconds. That was all it said. It didn't need to say more. The footage was attached. Anyone who wanted to understand what had happened could watch it. A lot of people watched it. Kang Yu found Rena in the delegation lounge 20 minutes after the match ended. She was sitting at the table with her right arm resting on a folded towel, a cold compress held against her shoulder, and a fresh cup of coffee in her left hand. She was reading something on a tablet, not the match footage, not the council reaction feeds, but what appeared to be a technical document about structural joint mechanics in Velthari physiology. Research for next time, he supposed. Bake Soul was asleep in the corner chair with his mouth open. Ote had apparently made everyone sandwiches at some point, which were sitting on the table in a neat row, most of them untouched. Kang Yu sat down across from Rena and looked at her shoulder. "How bad?" he said. "Bruised, not broken." "You're sure?" "I've broken it before. I know the difference." He nodded. He picked up one of the sandwiches. He wasn't particularly hungry, but doing something with his hands seemed like the right idea. "Doru hasn't filed any protest," he said. "He won't," Rena said. "He accepted the challenge legally. The result is legal. There's nothing to protest. His aide came to the East Corridor when you were leaving. I saw them. They wanted to talk to you." Rena glanced up from the tablet. "What did they say?" "Nothing. They stood there for a moment, and then left." She looked at him for a moment, then back at the tablet. "They'll send a formal communication by morning, probably requesting access to human martial arts training records. The Velthari are methodical. They'll want to understand what happened before they say anything official." "And we'll share them?" "All of it," she said. "Every discipline, every technique, open records. Let them study it." "You want to give them the information?" "It doesn't matter if they have the information," she said calmly. "Understanding how something works and being able to do it are very different things. You can read every book ever written about swimming and still drown the first time you get in the water." She took a sip of coffee. "Besides, it's good politics. Openness looks better on the record than secrecy." He thought about that. He found, as he often did with Rena, that by the time he had thought about it, she had already arrived at the right answer, and was several steps past it. "The council is going to want a statement," he said. "Write something short," she said. "Don't be dramatic. Don't make it about winning. Make it about the record being corrected." "That's it?" "That's all it needs to be." The communications came in through the night. By morning, 32 separate species delegations had sent formal requests to the Earth Diplomatic Channel. Most of them wanted access to records. A few wanted to open discussions about what the Council's physical capability assessments actually measured, and whether the current methodology needed revision. Two of them, the Pelori and a species called the Wenrath, whose homeworld was somewhere in the outer sectors, and who had said almost nothing during the entire summit, sent messages that were not formal requests, but something closer to personal notes. The Pelori message said, in translation, "We apologize for the laughter. We did not understand what we were seeing." The Wenrath message was shorter. It said, "How do we send our people to train with yours?" Kang Yu read them both over breakfast, and felt something ease in his chest that had been tight since the previous morning. He forwarded them to the diplomatic office back on Earth, with a note to handle the follow-up, and then sat quietly with his coffee for a while. Across the station, in the Velthari medical section, Vrail lay on a treatment platform and stared at the ceiling. His right primary limb was in a stabilization frame. The injury was not permanent. Velthari physiology repaired well given time. But it was significant. The joint would need 6 weeks of recovery. He had been told this by 3 different medical staff members, each of whom had said it with an expression that was hard to read. He kept replaying the match in his mind. Not the moment of the crack. That part he understood mechanically, even if he had not seen it coming. The way she had moved around him in that circle, patient and quiet, for almost 2 full minutes. He had thought, at the time, that she was stalling, that she was afraid and didn't know what to do with that fear. He had been wrong about that completely. She had been working. She had been reading him the entire time, building a picture of his patterns, waiting for the moment she already knew was coming, because she had seen it in footage she didn't know she had watched. She had walked into that ring already knowing how it was going to end. He had walked in knowing the same thing. He had just been wrong about which direction. He stared at the ceiling for a long time. Then he asked his aide to get him access to the human martial arts records that the Velthari research team was now officially reviewing. For himself. He wanted to understand. In Busan, the sun was coming up over the water. Choi Dae had been awake since the feed went live. He had watched the match on a screen propped against the window of his small apartment, sitting in the same chair he sat in every morning, with the same cup of tea. He had watched it once all the way through without saying anything. Then he had watched it again, more slowly, pausing at certain moments. He had trained fighters for 32 years. He had trained people who went on to compete at levels he could never have reached himself. And he had been proud of all of them, in different ways. But Rena had always been something specific. Not the most talented when she started. Not the strongest or the fastest. Just the one who came back, every time, without exception. Whatever happened, however it went, she came back. He paused the footage at the moment of the lock. He looked at the angle of her hands, the position of her hips, the way her weight was distributed. It was correct. Everything was correct. It was exactly what he had spent years drilling into her on a mat in a gym that smelled like floor cleaner and old rubber. He pressed play again and watched the end. He did not cheer. He was not that kind of person. He sat quietly and watched her bow to the Velthari section and walk out of the ring. And he felt something simple and clean that he did not have a particular word for. He finished his tea. Then he got up, put on his jacket, and walked downstairs to open the gym. There was a class at 8. There were always people who wanted to learn. There had always been people who wanted to learn. That was the thing nobody outside ever quite understood about what happened in those small gyms, in those ordinary buildings, on those worn mats in cities all over the world. It was never about the fights. The fights were just the measure. The thing itself was the practice, the coming back, the learning the language of pain and endurance and angles and patience, year after year, until it was part of you. Across 40 star systems, 43 species were waking up to a record that had been corrected. Files were being updated, assessments were being reviewed, research teams were opening archives they had never looked at. A 3-meter champion was lying in a medical bay asking to read about humans. A junior diplomat was finally breathing normally. An ambassador had nothing to protest. And in a gym in Busan, a door was opening, and the morning light was coming in, and Choi Dae was setting out the mats. Just like every other day. They assumed we needed weapons to be dangerous. They forgot we spent thousands of years learning how to hurt each other with nothing but our hands, and then spent thousands more learning how not to.